open to on second thought.
Okay, so this is a father's rights issue now. You're
well,
fighting.
It's not a father's rights issue. The other related to payment of child support while unemployed. My current career has been as a contracted project manager for software quality assurance. And in that kind of role, I work for a variety of different companies, and sometimes these projects don't last very long, so there are periods of downtime and uptime. And under the statute, the courts and the statutes mandate that child support be adjusted up or down according to the circumstances of the obligor, or the father in my case, and the court was not complying with those federal and state statutes. The court was not complying with those federal and state statutes. So I had taken up on appeal that issue, as well as the illegality of ordering child support for an emancipated offspring who resided in a state, Colorado, where the statute is very unambiguous and says no judge shall order post-secondary education expenses for any child of divorced or separated parents. And the New Hampshire courts simply were not complying with that Colorado statute.
How do they get away with that?
A judge apparently is free to make an order in whatever fashion they so choose, and if you disagree, your only relief is through the appellate process. So I had, in New Hampshire, we do not have an appellate court. Our only process of appeals is straight to the New Hampshire Supreme Court. And this was my second New Hampshire Supreme Court appeal. My first one had succeeded, and at the time the appeal was on the table, but the judge threw me in jail anyway, even though the appeal had not been
This
heard.
wasn't even a custody issue over who has custody of the kid. This was just a college education issue, and they're trying to make you pay that under the Colorado where you'd come from. That was not the case.
Well, our divorce was in New Hampshire. Almost within less than 30 days after the divorce, my ex-wife moved our 3 children to Colorado.
Oh, wonderful. That was nice of her.
And from that point on, Colorado law basically steps into play. And the Colorado law states that a judge may not order post-secondary education expenses.
And the New Hampshire judge was not going to obey the Colorado law.
The statute, that's correct.
So that's what you were appealing, and that's how you happened to be the eyewitness to a homicide in the Valley Street jail, right? Because he was saying, all right, you don't comply, I'm going to put you, Mr. Burke, in the jail to think about it and cool your heels.
That's correct.
So you're sitting there, you haven't committed any felony, you're just a victim of the judicial abuse. That's normal in custody cases. I hear this all day, every day. I get emails about fathers being abused in court. And here, in the past months, we had a case of April Cummings, who is a non-custodial mother, who is getting really beat over by the judicial process. But there's other issues that complicate her case. In your case, you're sitting in this jail. Where's this color thing we had?
It's probably one under.
We had here. Here it is. You're sitting in this jail. This is a new modern jail. Is this right?
Yes, it is. I believe it's about 10 years old, but it's a fairly modern facility by most standards.
And you were in this green cell here?
That is correct.
You're up here in the green cell.
This is not a diagram of the entire jail facility. This is a diagram of the pod.
One pod.
One pod. This is pod 1E, which is known as the classification pod. And that is where all people are brought to for a period of approximately 1 to 2 weeks until such time as the jailers can assess risk and classify them into some other holding facility within the overall jail complex. I do not know how many pods there are in the jail. Okay. I would suspect there's probably 6 or 8, but I have no idea.
What had happened? Mr. Armstrong had just finished breakfast. You'd all finished breakfast?
Yeah, I had been brought to the jail the prior day, late in the afternoon, and was actually assigned to that green cell approximately 10 or 11 o'clock at night. And the following morning, all the cells are opened up and we are served food from this particular
Up here?
area. And there are, I haven't drawn on the map, but there are lots of tables on the yellow floor area, which is on the main floor.
Okay.
And after breakfast, we were ordered back to our cells. In fact, it's a very rapid breakfast, probably about 10 or 15 minutes. And we were, had returned to my cell on the second tier. This is a tiered jail facility. There's a first floor and a second tier, which is kind of like a second floor.
And what's the first moment you realized, what time was it that morning when you realized something was not right? Something was going on. What did you hear? What did you see?
Because it was my first time in this particular jail, I had chosen to stand at the door of my jail and look out through the window to see what the routine is. Because if one doesn't understand the routine, then it's pretty difficult to have acceptable behavior. So I was standing at the jail cell door, gazing out onto the yellow floor, which I could see almost entirely. And this is a control console that opens and closes all the cell doors and all the doors in and out of the pod, which are located right here.
Okay, where was Mr. Armstrong?
I have no idea where he was when I was looking out, but what I observed was everyone basically was clear of the floor. There were one or two stragglers. The guard at the console was constantly yelling at an inmate in this general area to get back into his cell and to close the door. And apparently he was not getting compliance. All of a sudden I noticed an inmate walking out from behind the staircase which leads up to the second tier. I don't know what cell he came from, but as he walked out from behind the staircase, I picked him up. He walked over and stopped directly in front of the control console, which is approximately the height, a little bit higher than your kitchen sink.
When you say you picked him up, you mean you caught sight of him?
I caught sight of him, that's correct.
Caught sight of him right here, walking over the console.
Right, and he was the only inmate on the floor at the time.
So he was the only inmate, and you later discovered that was Brian Armstrong.
I later believe that to be Brian Armstrong. I have no proof of it. I have indirect evidence.
What happened when this man you now think is Brian Armstrong approached the console?
Brian approached the console. The guard continued yelling at Brian. Brian was not yelling back as near as I could tell. He was standing erect, straight, hands down to his side. Suddenly the guard, in a fit of anger, reached up over the console, grabbed him by his clothing or his armpits, I'm not quite sure which, it happened so quick, pulled him up over the console, and then thrust him, launched him like a projectile into the air and back across the floor, at which time his head impacted first on the concrete floor.
The back of his head?
The back of his head.
Could you hear a crack or something?
It sounded like somebody had dropped a watermelon from 50 feet. It was the most sickening sound I've ever heard.
So you heard his skull splatter?
I heard the sound of what I call a crack splat. There was a very hard crack and then kind of a splatting sound, which I now presume to have been just the air being expelled out of his lungs from the impact on the floor.
Wow. This must have been a pretty husky guard.
They seem to be a little bit the same size, comparable size as Brian. I have never seen anyone do jiu-jitsu or any of the martial arts. It looked to me like it was a martial arts type move from the kind you see in stunt actors do in movies. But he had incredible body strength to both grab him forward and then launch him backward. I was totally impressed by the strength of that guard.
Do you know that guard's name?
I have suspicions of his name, and I have revealed